Welcome to Kinky Knots Cafe Proactive is the Way, where we provide you tools and resources to enhance your mind, body, and spirit. Get ready, folks. Let us nurture you from the inside out. Happy holidays, my friends. We are just one day away from the big man gracing us with his presence tomorrow. And before we wind down and submerge into overindulgence and a load of fun with family and friends, we want to wrap up our year with making sure that you are equipped with the knowledge on how to listen most effectively to that whisper that guides you as you make decisions. Especially this week, with all the eating, drinking, and festive affairs going on. 2 weeks ago, we launched our series on the art of discernment and learned about how to judge well to make effective decisions. I share that Ray believes it is so important that we learn how to make decisions effectively. In order to make decisions effectively, we must first possess the ability to learn and then decide. We talked about how we can become effective at analyzing information and come to a logical conclusion to make sound decisions by better understanding the sources of information in which we acquire and our predispositions when making a decision. Some of our predispositions that we highlighted are usually influenced by our upbringing and culture, which includes our spiritual ideologies, our socioeconomic status, and our community. While Ray does an amazing job of disclosing all of the considerations we must take into account when making effective decisions, what he shares is tangible and easily validated. But what about the intangible? What about decisions that we make which are influenced by messages or information we receive or gather using our intuition, our ability to communicate telepathically, and foresight? If you need clarity on what each of these attributes are, please check out our first episode for this series, Season 2, Episode 5, The Art of Discernment. Folks, I cannot stress how important context is. It is extremely important. So please make sure that you go and check it out so that you have a complete understanding and rationale for our convos today. So let's get back to these attributes. These attributes of man, they are leveraged by us to gather information. Once again, intuition, right? Foresight, and our ability to communicate telepathically. So we use these attributes and they influence our decision making process. And personally, I think it is so important that we acknowledge that these attributes exist in playing a critical role in our decision making process and make sure that we are equipped with a strategy that we can use to better understand the source and how to validate that the information we acquire is a value add and intended to help us to truly navigate effectively through life. So, I provided some techniques that can be used in the secular and non secular spaces, along with recommendations on how to get the most out of using these techniques. Of course, this information was provided based on my research and analysis of our featured book for this month, Discerning the Voice of God by Priscilla Schreier. And today, we are actually going to connect with others to get their perspectives. So this month, I had an opportunity to interview two folks. I really couldn't choose, so I am going to highlight both of them. Rhonda Parker Taylor Rhonda, she owns her own business titled Intelligent Business Solutions, in which she provides life skills, leadership, and career development training. She's an academic researcher and served on a UN Global Compact team, presenting findings on the emotional intelligence of global leaders. And as if that was not enough, she's an Amazon best-selling author. To learn more about Rhonda, you can visit her website at rhondaparkertaylor.com. I'll include her website within the description. We also interviewed Joseph Holmes. Joseph is very green in his career, serving as a mental health advocate for children and adults. During my interviews, I focused on three core questions to help us get a different perspective. So we will kick things off with highlighting the considerations and the tangible and intangible resources that they use to help them make effective decisions. So let's begin with Rhonda. Rhonda, she shared that she believes that her way is not always the right way. And one of the resources that she leverages is her emotional intelligence and using that to help in navigating her core decision-making process. She stated when she goes through her process, she has to map out the issue and conduct brainstorming sessions that can be vetted with others as she seeks for feedback. But once her decision has been made and fully vetted, she will own it and move forward. And from her perspective, it is necessary to revisit it to critique the resolution for growth and improvement. So interesting. Now, Joseph had some interesting points too, as he reflected on letting intuition serve as a key resource in his decision-making process. Let's take a moment to hear his thoughts.
Well, so for me, the first thing that I do, regardless of the situation, is I promise myself I'll be true to myself. And so in every situation, I look at myself and I say, self, I literally talk to myself
Mhm.
and I say, one, um, is it necessary?
Mhm.
Two, am I okay with it?
Mhm.
And then three, what is the potential outcome? Right. And so for me, that allows me to consciously make the decision. So one, if it's not necessary and I still feel like I want to do it and
Mhm.
there's no perceived negative outcome, I might still do it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If it's necessary, then I'll be like, God, listen,
Mhm.
I don't think I want to do this.
Mhm.
But if you just show me something, like, what is the purpose of it? If you show me the purpose,
Mhm.
I'll do it, regardless if I want to do it or not. I'm very purpose driven,
Okay.
right? So I'm like, God, what's the purpose?
Mhm.
And if I see the purpose, or if I just have right blind faith, right, based off my relationship with God, and I'm like you when it comes to that. My definition is both of those combined,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
It's beyond, but also within.
Okay.
Um, and so it's that.
Mhm.
So when I've passed that, preliminary stage, then it's really uh, if I'm the main character, let's say, right? So it's based off my actions and what I need to do and things like that. Then I let intuition and if there's structure there, I let that guide my principles or at least guide the way that I go,
Okay.
right? If
Okay.
it's something that I'm not familiar with, then I let intuition guide more than structure.
Okay. Okay. And when you say your intuition guide more than structure, w-
Right.
talk to me a little bit about your intuition. How come you find your intuition more validating than anything else?
because I can trust it.
Okay, because you trust yourself. Because you,
I trust. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, so for me, intuition is you can say God in me. You can say unknown knowledge, right?
Okay.
And so to me, that's what intuition is. It's unknown knowledge. Like consciously, I have no idea. But this feeling, this gut feeling, this intuition,
Hmm.
it's guiding me this way. And it's never steered me wrong before. So
Hmm.
I'm going to trust this when
Hmm.
I'm in unfamiliar territory.
Okay. And do you feel like your intuition is because it's developed over time, a series of circumstances that help you to make a decision? Because they talk about, because you said your gut, and there's this connection between our gut and our brain.
Hmm.
And they talk about the fact that we have a lot of information that's stored in our head. And when it comes to making a decision that we feel like we're not too sure about, or we feel like we don't have enough information on, but say we have to make that decision right then and there, the connectivity, that information that's stored in here begins to speak to our gut.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, once again, would you say that it's about the fact that you know yourself very well based on your life experiences, etc.?
Um, I think it's more so based on my ability to overcome,
Okay.
right? So going with intuition, right, our gut feeling doesn't necessarily mean it's the easiest route,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But in those decisions, I feel that whatever, comes of this, I can overcome it because I'm being pushed this way. Or even, sometimes the gut feeling is to avoid also. So,
Hmm.
um, but I feel that if I'm led by intuition, that also means that I am aligned completely, right, from head to toe.
Okay.
And
Almost.
so I
Okay.
can overcome whatever, obstacle is in the way.
Hmm. That's interesting you said that, because it made me think. What just popped in my head is that saying that I would hear in church: God will never put you into a situation that you cannot handle.
Hmm.
Will never be put into spaces or places that were not designed for you, or that you didn't possess enough tools to
Right.
at least begin to work your way out of it or into a better position. I don't know why, but that just kind of popped in my head as you were speaking. Okay. So thank you. So you stated, for you, in terms of making those effective decisions, it is very, very necessary, or it's extremely important that you determine as to whether or not it is necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you want to do it? And that's a good one, because do you want to do it? A lot of, if you like read scripture, they talk about that blind faith. God said do it. And for example, Abraham, right? And you think to yourself, like, woo, would I do that? I don't know if I do that. I don't know if I do that in this day and age, but that folks do have that blind faith. And so it wasn't about, do I want to do it? No, you just do. You must do it, right? Because God said, which is pretty interesting. I love reading the stories about that blind faith, and then making sure that whatever it is that you're doing, is it purpose driven. I think that is so important. We do a lot of things without really asking ourselves that, is this a value add? Is this going to be a value add? But sometimes we don't see. Sometimes we don't see the benefits of what we're doing because they're not meant for us to benefit or see the fruits of that labor now,
Mhm.
but far, far in the future, right? So we're here, for example, Martin Luther King, right? I mean, he died before he got to see the dream that he so spoke about during his "I Have a Dream" speech, to see that that actually came to into fruition. Thoughts on that?
On him. So he said that new intuition guides him more than structure. And I would have to agree to that. That actually should be your foundation. And then you utilize the structure, to achieve discipline in whatever matter or whatever subject, whatever goal, challenge that it is that you're trying to accomplish. In this scenario, we're talking about just overall successful principles. And so I like that he had three things he asked himself before making, a decision. Look at myself and I say, self, which actually I learned that way back in Hampton when my psych professor came into the classroom. He was showing how we as a group we were becoming desensitized. Now, since back in the day, uh, we weren't as desensitized as we are now. Like now it's just the magnitude of desensitization is ridiculous. So he came into the room and I'll never forget. He came in there cursing and acting a fool, walking down in that auditorium. And me and Samari looked up. We're like, who is this clown? Like
Mhm.
whatever. And the whole time it was the professor. And he was waiting to see if anybody was going to say no. Nobody said anything. And
Mm,
it's because we have fallen into that trap. But I said all that to say that he started off like I used to say to myself, self. That's how he started off the lecture.
okay.
So the first time I heard that, I used to use it all the time as well too. But I like that he uses that and says, I look at myself and say, is it necessary?
Mhm.
Am I okay with it? And that was the third. What is the outcome?
And what is the outcome?
Yeah.
And if he's not inclined to do it, he needs to understand the purpose. Is it purpose driven, uh,
Right.
behind it? But yeah,
And I
yeah.
have an appreciation for what he has developed for himself.
Hmm.
Now, granted, intuition is not going to work for everyone because intuition is spiritual. And if you are not spiritual, you can't hear the spirit.
Hmm. Well, so intuition is, I think it's twofold. So you have a spirit, and I call spirit our God, right? Our community of individuals who speak to us. But you also internally have your own abilities and capabilities to take a look at a situation, analyze it, and make a decision based on the knowledge that you've acquired over time, which is why I kept trying to ask him, how come you would lean on your intuition when you was unsure about something? I thought that was a bit backwards, honestly. I was like, wow, something where he's not sure, he leans more on his intuition versus structure. When he's sure, he goes through a structured process in order to make a decision. When he's unsure, I have to go on my intuition because it never steered me wrong. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. You go on your intuition. Why? Why do you go on that versus going through a structured process? And his take on it, what I got from it, I kept trying to say it. I wanted to get a better understanding of it. I don't know if and because it's very difficult to talk about. How do we talk about intuition and take something that is intangible and make it tangible?
Well, you present it as discernment because it there's those semantics again, and then that's the or what you know in English we have so many words that really mean the same thing, you know. So it's so very confusing. But when you, as you were saying that, what popped in my brain
Mhm.
was discernment. And when things pop into your brain like that, that is intuition, but that is the spirit speaking to you. That's
It could
the
be either
spirit.
or, which is why I wanted to do this. It could be either or. I wanted to do this because it could be the spirit, but it also could be it could be you. It could be from your life experiences. It also,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
not, yes, you
Yeah.
are one in the same, but at the same, you are individual. And so I think we have to get better. And I want folks to understand the difference between the two. And that's why I had brought the whole piece up about telepathy, because people who have the gift of telepathy and can speak have the ability to do very well the byproduct of telepathy, mind control and mind reading. So people have the capabilities to read your mind. And if they have the capabilities to read your mind, they have the capabilities to control it.
Mm,
So you have to
that's
be
true.
very careful, which is why I wanted to get into this particular topic so that we can discern the difference, where we can discern where is this knowledge coming from? Is it coming from us? And we'll talk about this a little bit later on about
Yeah, like is it
self-awareness.
innate?
Yeah, is it innate or is it coming from the spirit? Or Priscilla highlights the reason why you have to discern or practice the discern the voice of God is because not every voice that you hear is God's voice, is her thought. And so you have to be very um, uh, disciplined and practice hearing the voice, because there are some voices, those individuals who have the capability to read minds and mind control, to interject their thoughts into your thoughts. And
Mm,
so you have to learn to be able to discern the difference between. And I say that this is very important because in other places, they teach this. In other places, they train their children to understand how to do this. And so we have to be very careful with our knowledgeable, not careful too, but knowledgeable about the fact that this exists so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves. And so we'll give folks some techniques with regards to how to do that. But yeah, I really like Joseph's approach. I focused on Joseph because he really went into intuition. And you can tell he had a nice thought process with regards to how he manages leveraging his intuition to help him make effective decisions, and also how he validates intuition, something that is so intangible, and made it tangible. All right. So, and leveraging these intangible resources, I shared that I wanted to better understand how do they make sure that the resources or the information which is acquired is validated and reliable, right? So going back again, how do we take something that's intangible and make it tangible? So this was my next question, my next inquiry. And Joseph shared that he approaches it like a math problem. He says, I'm here and I need to get there. And in order for me to do that, what is missing in this equation? And he makes sure that he puts forth effort to deduce the information by filling in the blanks and trying to find the solution. And so from his perspective, he takes that into consideration. And then he has three value points. One is people, right? What is the impact of his decision on people? And how are people impacting him in making that decision? And he stated he also values intention and outcome. Are my actions being received as I present them? And if not, how do I improve on them? So that was kind of his approach to making sure that he validates his intuition, that he helps, that he takes those steps and considerations in order to ensure that his intuition is reliable. In this next clip, Rhonda highlights that she leverages emotional intelligence, her personal and social skills to navigate life and make effective decisions. Let's listen to Rhonda to get her perspective on the steps that she takes to validate her emotional intelligence.
Well, the good thing is there are assessments out there for people. If they want to go out there, they can, Google assessments to rate themselves. There is a number that tells you on every 21 characteristics of emotional intelligence. If anybody's wanting to learn more about them, I use the EQ model. But for me, in the decision-making process, I would say the two most important decision-making intangible characteristics would be openness to experience and empathy. And I did the study that I did for the UN Global Compact Committee was testing multinational leaders. These are leaders that are CEOs or vice presidents for the large organizations that go from country to country. We measured their emotional intelligence. And then we did the domestic leaders, the ones that only work in one country.
Okay.
And the emotional intelligence scores for the multinational leader was higher in every category but one for the multinational leader. It was hot. And of course, then that means the national leaders were lower in every category except for one. And the one that they were not the same on was self-impression of themselves. The multinational leader ranked lower in the impression of themselves and how important they were compared to the domestic leader. So what does that tell you about how the domestic leader is going to make decisions? They're not open to experience. They have no empathy. And those were the scores that they were really low on the domestic side. So the intangible, yes, you can go out there and take the test and get a score, but the intangible part in everyday life, you're not going to say, but my score is this high. The intangible part is, can you put yourself in your people's shoes? Are you open to experiences? And that's not just other people's opinions. That is other ways of doing things, going outside that box and learning how other people do it. If you're not willing to find out what your competition is doing and what makes them successful and try things that compete in that area, you're not doing yourself any justice. And you're not being proactive and making solid decision making. If you make cookie cutters of yourself in your employee ranks, and a cookie cutter, you're sitting there, everyone's a Santa Claus or a reindeer or a star. Whatever it is, and you're making those cookies. If you're making cookie cutters of yourself in your ranks, no experience outside of self. And so my father, being an entrepreneur, he always made each one of us work outside of the company before we were allowed to work inside of the company. Because you have to have experience outside.
Well, diversity of thought, right?
Yes.
Talk about diversity from an ethnic perspective, but if you have people, you can have 100 Black people in a room, but if there's no diversity of thought and everyone is thinking the same, you won't be able to leverage that information for growth, for change, for so yeah, I appreciate your father for, understanding that realization that you have to go outside of your box. You
Yes, you
gotta go
have to.
outside of your 10-mile radius and see how the world thinks. And you will come back astonished,
Oh,
quite amazed, right?
it's not, it's astonishment. It's also a life lesson, because sometimes those experiences, those thoughts are good, and
Mhm.
sometimes they're bad.
Mhm.
Like I said, I came from a small community. Then I went to a small high school, which was only 50 in my graduating class. Now, people that, went to a school that had 1,500 in their graduating class will appreciate this. How do you navigate the real world when you only had the same 50 people all your life?
Right.
You think everybody's good. You think everybody's, got the best intentions, and guess what? That's
Mhm.
because their parents chose that for their children. They wanted an environment that was controlled. They didn't have the chaos. They didn't have, all these other things.
Mhm.
But what about the experience of dealing with the 1,500? What
Mhm.
happens when you get out there in a large corporate environment and you're dealing with 1,500? So
Mhm.
it goes in all it, we talked about the leadership role, but it goes in our social world. It goes in our religious world. It goes in, every aspect of our life. If you don't step outside your box,
Mhm.
you don't see the beauty of other people's thoughts
Mhm.
and understand that. Also, you don't understand the pitfalls of other people's thoughts
Right.
and their motivations. So it's both directions. You make decisions by gathering the data, and it's not always quantitative. It's also not, it's intangible.
Right.
And openness to experience is a big one, and an empathy, because you could buy a gift card
Mhm.
for Ruth Chris for your employees, big steakhouse.
Right.
What if they can't afford the tip?
Right.
What if they don't have a car to drive there, or
Mhm.
the clothes to wear to make them comfortable, or they're just not into eating out? Some people just aren't going to do it
Right.
because they don't know how the food's prepared or whatever. So learn to have that, put your feet in other people's shoes, and we'll say, oh, wait a minute, they need a muffler.
Mhm.
Get them, they need a, whatever it might
What
be.
is the realities of life? Yes,
Right.
yeah, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on Rhonda? What she,
Like her.
you like her, right?
Uh-huh. So validating like your emotional intelligence, and I didn't know there was 21 characteristics, but I'm pretty sure I know of all of those different assessments that you can perform to determine like who am I really?
Mhm.
Like the Brigham, I think it's the Briggs assess. There's just a lot out there that
Mindset.
if you're really trying to make change, if you're really trying to improve upon your situation, you can do a self-assessment
Mhm.
and make things better. But anyway, when she was talking about decision making and the EQ model, and then openness to experience and having empathy, that was powerful. That speaks volumes. But I'll tell you what just resonated with me
Mhm.
the most, and I think I like cliches. I like when people make little sayings.
You notice them all.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I do.
Mhm.
When she said we live in lives where we can't afford the tip.
Right. Well, and that came from the fact that individuals are not leveraging their emotional intelligence or do not have a high level of emotional intelligence to manage people effectively.
Mhm.
And we're so if I could be candid, we're egoists. We are all focused on doing what we want to do right now, our way, and not really, as she mentioned, putting ourselves into someone else's shoes to have an understanding. So, leveraging that knowledge, that external information to help make better decisions.
Mhm.
And so that's where she was going on with regards to, well, how I leverage emotional intelligence, something that is where we are taking our soft skills, right? Our characteristics, our behaviors, and we're getting better within our behavior so that we are making more effective decisions, better decisions, if you will. And she highlighted the openness, the fact that we need to be open, the fact that we need to practice empathy a little more.
Which is synonymous with vulnerability.
With oh, let me tell you how this is just so lined up, because next month that's what we are highlighting.
Right.
We all about being more open minded and practicing being more vulnerable. But yes, being vulnerable so that we can get outside of our box, acquire a different perspective so that we can see the beauty. God, can we see the beauty within
I just want to see the beauty.
Period.
I want to see the beauty.
Just
because
see,
I like beautiful things.
right.
So I want to see the beauty.
All like beautiful things, but I think it's so
We do, but we all can't attain it.
But
we all can't achieve it.
It's a mindset. Everything that we're talking about right now is a mindset. Where do you place your mind in order to have those life experiences, to see the beauty in other people's thoughts, to better understand people's motivations so that, you're not coming across as an asshole and not taking things into consideration when you have a thought or a comment or a recommendation or a suggestion. So I really like that she shared that we have to get better at that. And that's what she actually uses in order to help validate her emotional intelligence, how to validate leveraging her emotional intelligence to make an effective decision. So yeah, I really like that. Getting different perspectives. I can't stress that enough. That is so important. And when we get into it's a great segue actually for our last question that we had for our guests on today's show, was with regards to some of the techniques. But before we do that, I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you go about making a decision? Like, what do you use? What resources do you use?
Well, right now, a big one is artificial intelligence. But what I like to do is define the problem or the decision to be made, right? So what I like to look at is why. Mm-hmm. I ask myself why a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, why is this going on? Why do I have this problem? So because I want to clearly articulate the problem or the decision that I'm facing. Mm-hmm. And I want to break it down into manageable components so I understand its complexities a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So then after I do that, I gather relevant information. Mm-hmm. Where I'm identifying and collecting data from from any information related to my problem. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ensure that my sources are reliable. We talked about diversity earlier. Mm-hmm. And up to date. So they got to be current. It's got to be current evidence. Mm-hmm. that applies to my situation or because it's a problem or decision, it's something that you expect to have to navigate through or troubleshoot or have some sort of formal process. Mm-hmm. Then again, I organize and prioritize my information. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, I forgot his name. What was his name? How he has that look at myself and say, is it necessary? Am I okay with it? What is the outcome?
Joseph.
Huh?
Joseph?
Yeah, Joseph. Mm-hmm. Similar to him, I organize and prioritize my information. Mm-hmm. So I structure the information that I'm gathering mm-hmm. into a logical and coherent manner. And then I'm prioritizing the information based on its relevance to the decision that's going to be made or the problem that I'm attempting to define. Then there's always that piece, and because I'm a nurse practitioner, this is crucial for me, is critical thinking, because I was groomed into critical thinking into my profession.
Mm-hmm.
So critical thinking questions assumptions and biases inherent in the information that I have identified and collected.
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking evaluates the credibility of my evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is good and bad, but considering alternatives, perspectives, and potential implications.
Mm-hmm.
This is good and bad in a sense, because if you're solely working on intuition, you don't really need input from anybody. You don't get input. It's within, or wherever it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what I do
That
is
is
I call every Tom, Dick, and Harry
mm-hmm.
to get an alternative perspective
But
to
that is
understand my problem.
mm-hmm. But intuition is input. Intuition, there's a component, and that's why, you know, this can get it can get complex in the sense that intuition, yes, it is from within, but when you couple it with individuals' capabilities to communicate telepathically, you do have that input that's coming in from your source. Some folks call their source God. Some folks call it
Oh,
the
true.
right.
True.
So you do have those different perspectives, and it's funny you brought up that whole bit about AI and that you leverage that a lot more um, because now we actually can take people out of the equation. We can take how do I want to say individuals how do I want to say we can take people out of the equation. We can take a
Which I
whole
think is irresponsible, but yeah.
I honestly no, because sometimes people get so involved, they get so involved in leveraging their own agenda. Because everyone, we were talking about this earlier, I was like, everybody has an agenda. Look at everybody. They have an agenda. They're trying to do something, to get something, to go somewhere, to do something, to be somebody. And I just keep thinking to myself, is anybody just living like, yes, you have your goals, but is anybody just like living for their goals and not necessarily for an agenda? um you know, so and so I think it's so important that we take that into consideration. But where I was going with regards to AI is that we take all of these different resources, these tools, to help us make a decision. The other one, so you said one, get the perspective. The other one that I tend to do, so I'm actually aligned with your decision making process, but I do like to take every piece of information that I gather and run it through scenarios so that I can try and predict the outcome. So what would be the outcome? And if this is the outcome, if these are the potential outcomes, because I talked to you about this, a few weeks back about the fact that I got to have a contingency plan. I need a contingency plan for the contingency plan of the contingency. And I do.
And just is kind of digress just a tiny bit.
Mhm.
You have to have a contingency plan because, well, I'm gonna use this example. In medicine, there's a pill that if you have unprotected intercourse, if you take it within 3 days, it prevents pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
This doctor I used to work with, he used to say, I don't, oh my God, it just slipped my mind. I don't know why you have a plan B when you don't even have a plan A. Because it's called plan B. But anyway, go ahead.
No,
And then I wanted to interject and tell you about identifying patterns and trends.
Right. But yeah, so making sure that we go through that process, we predict the outcome um, of the information that we've gathered and the various potential solutions that we put together. So it's really important that we factor that in. And then there was another one. Towards me. Owning it at the end. Once we go through the process, we get the perspective, we finally make our decision, then owning it. I think where a lot of individuals fail is that they are scared to fail, or that they fear failure. And a part of, if you went through and fully validated and did well within your decision-making process, own it. Own it, and understand that there are consequences to everything. There are consequences, but the reason why we go through making these decisions, where we may have leveraged our intuition or telepathy or foresight, but the reason why we go through this process is so that we can do the most that we possibly can do to take preventative measures in avoiding painful situations. But not so much to the point that we hinder growth. Because in pain comes growth. It's an inevitable phenomenon. All right, so now that we understand Joseph and Rhonda's approach in validating the use of our natural capabilities, let's get their thoughts on some of the techniques that Priscilla shared in her book, Discerning the Voice of God, a process in which she uses to validate messages and make decisions based on the spiritual guidance provided. The four techniques the author shared, in which I focused on within her book, I felt applied in secular and non-secular spaces. We're going to listen to Rhonda as she gives us her insight. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about this, the intangibles, because this is kind of what this whole entire month is all about. I really want folks to be able to understand and be able to leverage their qualities, their characteristics, these natural capabilities that we have effectively. So this month we are reading a book, and this is going back to what you shared about being open-minded. We're reading a book this month. It is a Christian literature. The Christian literature, it's called Discerning the Voice of God. When I was going through a series of from Islam to Christianity, studying Judaism and many different facets of many different religions, I found in Christian literature there was a lot of discussion about how individuals go through their life. They'll always, God told me, or I heard the word, or, things to that effect. And so I was like, so when you hear that, because none of that data is quantifiable, it is all about someone's experience. How do we leverage that to make effective decisions and not just be like, God told me? I mean, in some spaces, that works. But when you get outside of your box, if you will, folks will be like, what? And help me to better understand what that actually means. So landed on this book, Discerning the Voice of God, I realized that there was an answer within this respective book, because she spoke about a whisper. She spoke about the fact that she gets a lot of her guidance for the decisions that she makes from God. And so from my perspective, I said, okay, well, how do I perceive that? Because my thoughts with regards to God are significantly different. I said, how do I perceive that? And so I landed on, the fact that we have these natural capabilities of telepathy, intuition, and foresight that helps guide our decisions. And so what I pulled out of her book was 4 techniques that I thought to myself, I was like, oh, wow, she's kind of spot on with regards to leveraging these techniques to help take the intangible and make it tangible, to help take the qualitative piece and quantify it through these various techniques, I'll call them. But one of them, so she had several. I mean, she had so many. I was like, oh my God, this is great information. But four of them that I felt applied very well to the secular, within the secular and non-secular space were the art of listening. The fact that she talked about leveraging the Bible and leveraging the word. And I was like, but a plethora of people, even myself, I leverage books, many different books from the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the many different books. Um, uh, and secular and non-secular books, right? So reading is essential. Technique number 3 was self-awareness. Technique 4 that I kind of pulled out of this book was build your network. So she pulled these out and said, these are the things that we have to do. We have to get better at listening. We've got to learn to read more. We have to understand there's this emotional intelligence ourselves, have a better understanding of self-awareness. We have to build our network. We have to engage a body of community of people so that we are not ignorant, lean on them and ask the tough questions so that we can make sure that what we heard or what we are experiencing is validated. What are your thoughts about what the author shared?
Well, I think since I have not read the book, I can take your 4 points and I can say it's spot on. First of all, whether it be the Bible, the Quran, any of the religious texts, if you read them, 50% of it agrees, at least, if not more. Similar, most of them have some of the same, chapters. So this is not just about one religion or another. It's about a thought process. And when you talk about whispering or listening, if you have practiced daily searching for knowledge, that whisper, that intuition, that intangible thought that you hear inside of yourself is what you've learned and you've explored. And yes, then you have a daily relationship, really, not only with self, but with the teachings of God's or your version of God or, prophets or whatever it is that you've studied. So you provided a foundation. It's almost like you've been coached. Every day when you go out into the world, you should be looking how you can learn from others. So if you're reading and let's say this year, someone that from, a Buddhist mentality and upbringing says, I'm going to read the Bible this year from chapter to chapter. What are you going to learn?
Right. What's the goal?
Or maybe you can they have, chronicles where you can look up, maybe you're going to pick a subject. So when I wrote Crossroads, my fiction novel, I'm like, okay, I want to explore 3 emotions. I want to explore anger, fury, and envy.
Okay.
And so then I went and I looked in the context of, it's basically like a dictionary of the terms. And I said, okay, in the Bible, it's seen here. And in, the Quran, it's seen here. And then I went and looked and, in Proverbs, which is most of the religions, at least study it, it says anger is cruel. And when you think about when someone gets angry, it is cruel and they strike out at people and they say crazy things. Fury is overwhelming. But who can stand before jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot. So that is a intangible emotion made tangible.
Right.
So when you take these lessons that she's talking about, you already put the foundation if you're doing the reading and you're doing the work. It doesn't matter which text, whether it be secular or religious or whatever, you've stayed focused and you're prepared to be resilient. You're prepared to move forward. You're prepared to make decisions. And, bless you for picking something outside of your box for reading it and then trying to understand it from a different perspective, because that means you took the intangible of openness
Mm-hmm.
and made it tangible.
All right. Yeah.
Because what a beautiful mindset that will bring you when you're faced with any kind of decision.
Bingo. That's what I wanted to hone in on, what you just said right there. And I think that's where we miss the point. Within our communities, within our world, even, we're so big on the messenger, focusing on the messenger, who said it, where they came from, that we miss the message. And so one of the things that I noticed, and I said, we have to learn to value each other, not for who you are, but for, I shouldn't say who you are, but for the background that you have from the teachings that you can provide. And so I think about like Priscilla Schreier in this particular instance. I was like, this girl is gifted. And I bet no one is even heard her because she comes from a Christian doctrine. And she has something that everyone could leverage, whether you are in the non-secular or the secular space, right? And yeah, she took something that was very difficult to quantify and helped us to better understand how to leverage this most effectively. I love the quote that you just provided from the Bible as well. The proverb, the quote you shared. One thing that we fail to realize is that all of this knowledge, everything that was brought, was to help teach us how to be aware for when this particular instance occurred, understand understand the motivation and understand the operation. So, for example, if you find that you're in an environment where, folks are always trying to anger you, or folks are always trying to make you jealous, or you're seeing it personally, you're being envious, right?
Right.
Understand that doesn't do you any good. It will make you sick, right? It will
Literally.
sick. So don't be envious, find your way within it. I can only bring that up because I just remember, working 20 years in HR, and I was just like, couldn't find a job. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. I can't get a job. And, I could have took the route of being angry, but something in me, a gift from God, said, no, create, girl, when the door closes on you, you have
Open.
that, create another one.
Create another one. And
Look
look
who's
at
the creator. God is a creator, right?
Right.
When we talk about God, we talk about creation.
Mm-hmm.
Why, if I quote unquote have the capabilities built in, as it's written, right? God's image, possessing God's attributes, why I can't create another one? And I appreciate, just to go back on these techniques, her providing kind of her experience over an upteen number of years with regards to how she learned to cultivate a practice that allowed her to just be more effective in this particular area. Setting up a practice where you sit and you really just she doesn't believe in full no thought meditation, if you will, but really setting an intention. And I told her, I was like, I'm so with you on that, because for the love of God, I cannot meditate. I have to have an intention. Otherwise, my mind will be all over the place. And so, I appreciate that component, and the fact that we've got to read. I used to live in New York, and I used to have to travel from the boogie down Bronx all the way to Wall Street. So I had a pretty long commute. I learned during the 4 years I was there so many different things to pass the time, knitting, reading, all types of things to keep my self busy, because I always say an idle mind is the devil's playground. So I would read, and I found when I read, the words start to speak to me. And sometimes the words are for at that moment. Sometimes the words are there. They capture my attention, but I know they're not to be used right then and there.
Right.
And then sometimes the word is not for me, but for someone that I'm close to.
Right.
And so I find it interesting how we all can kind of communicate with each other through literature,
Mm.
whether it be the Bible, the Quran, secular literature. I think we have to get better at reading, self-awareness, making sure we get to better understand ourselves, and whatever that takes. Washing dishes. I wash dishes. Your sister folds the laundry. She's gonna come on to my house and help a sister out, because I do not fold laundry. I hate it. I wash it, but I won't fold it. And so making sure that we take that time, but during that time, better understanding ourselves, and then of course the emotional intelligence. I think I can't remember the website, but I'll be sure to link it so folks know where they can go to take that test. And then building your network. Let's talk about that. The network that is so important, that you share the thoughts that are going through your mind. I tend to keep my network kind of small in terms of who I associate with, but I keep it broad when it comes from a business perspective. Because of course I own my own business, etc. I keep that pretty broad, tapping into people when I need something, and be able to bounce ideas off of. So that's so critical. All right. So what were your thoughts with regards to those techniques? And
At one point, she said something about it doesn't matter when you guys were dialoguing about the Bible. And I honestly, after so many years, how we grew up in the church, etc. We live in the Bible Belt. We were just extremely inundated with tenets from Scripture, which is okay. I ended up graduating from Christian school. You graduated from parochial, whatever. But I just didn't agree with her saying that, the type of literature, the type of information that you're placing in your mind doesn't matter. That's what I got from it. That may not be what she meant. I have a hard time with the Bible, because the people in the Bible had slaves, and it's hard to believe then that they also wrote this book to the group of people I belong to. And I was just saying that, not trying to make it about race or anything like that, but tenets from a book, a book on authority, right? An authoritative resource. It's just hard to digest.
That individual's mandate as a guide, when there was just so many different injustices that you can
I mean, so much corruption, enslavement, chaos, infidelity.
That makes me think about, though, and this is where I was going earlier with regards to how we put such an emphasis on the messenger versus the message.
Oh, true. You're right.
And we fail over and over again because we keep venerating and putting preachers, prophets, bodies of people who are human
And flawed, just like
and
yourself.
flawed, just
And
like.
people, that's what bothers me. I told you that's what bothers me about mommy.
But okay, but even in that does not mean that they cannot be a messenger. And even if you look through the Bible, and I think why the Bible was positioned in the way that it was positioned in terms of using flawed men. Read about the different men in the Bible. They were so flawed. But they had a message. They were the individuals who were chosen to bring a message. And this is why I said we have got to get out of that practice of venerating messengers, creating whole societies around people versus the messages that these individuals were designed to bring. Because the reality is that they are human. They're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. Nobody is perfect. And our thought process with trying to force perfection in those type of people, I think is flawed. We shouldn't do that because people have to come into their own growth, their own enlightenment on their own. We can suggest, we can make a recommendation for a change, but at the end of the day, those individuals will have to change on their own for it to be sustainable. Because don't know who you know who has told you got to do this, you got no. Most people hit rock bottom before they change, or they hit themselves into a wall to where it hurt enough that they make change, but it all has to be on them. But anyways, so going back to the Bible, I don't think the Bible was written for any race, any class, although it applied, or at that time, it applied to a specific group. And this is where I go back to enlightenment. Enlightenment is not for a specific group. Priscilla Schreier, she grew up Christian. She grew up in the church. That was her foundation to help her bring about the enlightenment that should apply across faiths, across cultures. It should be applied everywhere. But when we get because we've divided ourselves so much, now we don't even pay attention. We don't even listen to anybody else in a different group. I'm not going to listen to a Muslim because a Muslim ain't me, and then you just miss the whole. Now instead of bringing ourselves together to help pull the stories together that brings about complete enlightenment, complete understanding, now we got to wait for 20, 40, 100 years for that person that was over here talking to bring it to our side so we have an understanding. I just think we got to think about enlightenment different. We got to think about the messages that are being presented, where stop being so focused on the who that you miss the how, what, when, and where. We so focused on the who, we done missed every other point that message was supposed to bring. So yeah, but I believe, going back to how we got started on this, is with regards to, the fact that one of the techniques that Priscilla Schreier brought forth was the fact that reading is essential, and it doesn't have to be just the Bible. I'm going to talk about that right now. It can be in any type of literature, which is why it's interesting when they start banning literature,
Books.
and books. I'm like, what are you hiding? Give me that dang on book. What are you hiding? Because I need to see. Right, because people are slick. They're so slick. Oh, it's just got some deplorable. Shut that up. It's probably got a message in there. You saw it, and now you trying to keep it from everybody else. Don't do that. Don't hide knowledge. Share it.
Pretty much, people think they need to covet knowledge.
You don't do that. You don't do that. That's how we miss stuff. That's how we miss the key. That's how we miss very important information that is supposed to help us grow. But anyways, I can talk about this all day, and I don't want to lose my voice doing all of that. But it is so important, you guys, that reading is essential. And I don't care what you read. If you go back to the podcast that I did a couple weeks ago, I talked to you about some strategies to implement. If you don't like reading, listen. Because Tiffany, you like listening to audiobooks, right? Listening to them is like having your grandma or your mom or somebody significant reading to you. I mean, it's really nice, especially if you're in your car, long drive, exercising. Just put the book on and just listen to it. And I shared how I started with articles. I struggled when I left New York. It was very difficult. I don't know why. Very difficult for me to just sit down and read. I don't know if it's because I just didn't have time. I didn't find the time, etc. But I started small. I started with articles. Once I did articles, I moved into, using social media as but strategically using social media, pinpointing where I wanted to go to get information, and then reading um, uh, articles, reading information from communities of people about their thought process on a certain subject. And then I took all of that and I started tapping into people who actually focus on reading. And I think I sent you a couple books where people do short reviews of books, giving you the cliff notes. And some of those people were really skilled with teaching you how to enjoy reading. So I, picked up some techniques from them, and then I just started creating my own way to get into reading. But I cannot stress that enough, folks, because this is how those messages come through. It's very important that you read. And then, was there anything else we talked about with her? Self-awareness. We talked about building your network, your community. Was there anything else with regards to Priscilla's techniques?
Mm-mm.
No.
No.
All right.
Mm-mm.
Well, fantastic. Well, Joseph, we're not highlighting him here via video, but he did talk about community and the impact that his community had on him and how he viewed life. All right. So before we wrap up, this year is all about developing our principles. And of course, I couldn't let our guests get away without getting their insight on principles that are non-negotiable within their lives, and a message for the next generation to ensure that they stayed on the right path to
Well,
success.
so I said the first one earlier, and that's being true to myself.
Mhm,
Um, First and foremost, it mattered nothing else.
mhm.
And then after that, it's barriers,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Building barriers, and they're movable depending on the situation, depending on the relationship, but it's making sure that there are barriers for myself, but also barriers for other people, so
Okay.
that I'm not overextending.
Mm,
And even, for the other person or people, that they're not overextending either.
okay.
Um, Obviously, there's a balance between it too. So the perception of overextending can change.
Mhm,
Um, and uh, I had to learn this growing up, and no means no.
mm,
Whatever my definite no is,
mhm,
it's a definite no, and there's no changing it.
mhm,
Like I grew up and we had to learn how to do things. Like no one taught us.
mhm,
It was figure out, find your voice. I was the youngest, so I did have, my brother and my sister to defend me, but they would only do it up to a point, right? And they still expected me to, develop my own defense, if you will, right? Um, and I'm a passive guy, I don't believe in violence unless it's necessary, right? And so for me, it became talking my language,
mhm,
right? And building and finding my voice to say no.
mhm.
Um, and so it's that. To me, I used to say yes a lot,
Okay.
and I didn't want to do things, but I still said yes just to, move it along.
Mhm.
And then the more I said no, the more confident I became. So really, if you ask me most things, I'm going to say no. And I'll go back and change it, but I'm going to tell you no first.
Mhm.
And that's for me, not for you.
Okay.
Right. And then my last is interpretation and understanding.
Mhm.
You know, we all live a life. We don't always speak the same language. We don't always have the same understanding. We don't always have the same knowledge.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, at the end of the situation, I want to be able to understand you more. I also want to be able to understand myself more and some of the decisions that I make and some of the actions or things that I say or don't say.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can get an understanding or a better understanding of who I am and who we are and the relationship, and also just the community. I'm a information first person
Mm-hmm.
and then story second.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can get an understanding,
Mm-hmm.
I think everything else will be fine.
So principles for me is always show my initiative in a positive way and leave things better than I originally experienced them.
Mm-hmm.
Be responsible in my actions
Mm-hmm.
and to anticipate future problems. And that's by, being goal oriented or however you time management, problem solving and decisions, all of those kind of go, and be adaptable because, if I get so fixed
Mm-hmm.
on what I need to get done today or whatever the task is, then I forget the people oriented things or I forget some of the achievements that have happened and it takes the joy away.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to leave the world a better place
Mm-hmm.
when I leave it, whether it be just for the day, the month, the year, or when I permanently leave. I want it to be better because I joined that process of life.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can do that daily,
Mm-hmm.
then and I can impact others to kind of think of that also. And that doesn't mean being a doormat. Some people are like, okay, that means that you're giving too much of yourself. Or no, it means that you're constantly mindful of others.
Right.
And so that's probably the principle that I put most on myself is leave things better than what they were when you first experienced it.
I like that. I really like that. I got a little goosebumps when you said that because I think that's our role is to ensure that the next generation is leveled up.
Right.
And I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, I want you to be better than me. I want to be just like, no, be better than me. Okay.
Make every day great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if it's meant to be, it's up to me. It's not up to you to make me successful. It's not up to my mentor to make me successful. It's not up to my parents to make me successful. It's not up to my great aunt that has $1 million to make me successful. So many times we look for other people,
right,
to make us fulfilled. It's up to me.
right.
But the only way you're going to experience true joy is by following your own principles. When you're not following your own principles, what happens? You feel miserable.
Yeah. Well, you get off track.
Yep.
I would tell you that you get off track and spend so much time trying to get back on track, making so many concessions. And I was the concession girl. I was like, I needed to start a business on concessions. I can make a penny for every concession that I made within my life. But yes, you have to have that foundation. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful piece of advice to provide our next generation that they hopefully will be able to lean on in their future as they are going through life making decisions. All right, that is a wrap, folks. I do hope that you enjoyed our conversations today. Don't forget to pick up a copy of our featured books this month on the KK Cafe approved book list. Up next, The Tangential Mind. All right, it is definitely the holiday season. And on The Tangential Mind, I wanted to highlight the history of Christmas on the History Channel. I will be putting the link to this respective website under the description. The history of Christmas is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to better understand how did Christmas start, Is Christmas really the day when Jesus was born? Who invented Santa Claus? I thought this was a perfect time to help us better understand the holiday season and what it all means. I will share with you that while I don't necessarily celebrate Christmas in the traditional sense, I do truly appreciate this respective holiday as it is an opportunity to get together with family, friends, and better understand the reason why we exist. And one of those reasons is to really give back within our communities and to help one another find our space within this world. So, hopefully, as you are enjoying this particular holiday season with your family, you are being mindful of giving back and helping others as you are going through. Do not forget that this is the season of giving. I want you to join us in 2 weeks as we begin our discussions on our next featured principle: be radically open-minded. In order to be open-minded, at times we need to be vulnerable, putting our preconceived notions, our biases, and prejudices aside so that we can practice being open to other perspectives and diversity of thought. Next month, we will learn how to be more vulnerable so that we can become more open and receptive to the experiences that bring purpose and meaning to our lives. Our featured book will be Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. We look forward to you joining us, and in preparation for our discussions, please make sure to pick up a copy of Daring Greatly by Brené Brown on the KK Cafe approved book list. To access all replays or learn more about Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way, please visit www.kinkyknotscafe.com. Proactive is the way, my friends. Take good care.